After you complete this lesson, if you look at other people's soutache and bead embroidery, you'll begin to notice that many pieces are made using layered components. There's often the illusion that the soutache is endless pieces, but in fact they're usually smaller pieces tucked one behind the other. Trim your splash component so that there are approximately 3/4 of an inch of stem left at the top. Then place your stone component, or your oval-shaped bead component, on top of the splash. You can take some time here to adjust it so that as much of the splash component is showing as you want. You can really make some choices there about what looks right to your design eye. I like mine set so that the entire center spindle bead shows, but it's really up to you. The splash component is attached behind the oval bead component with simple tacking stitches. Make sure you put enough tacking stitches in that the pieces are very stable. You don't want the lower component to swing or pull away from the upper component. You'll probably use 8 to 9 stitches to get this done. Remember that when you're sewing into the front, you must put the needle right back into the same place where the thread came out, or very, very close. Don't jump from one piece of soutache to another when you are sewing from front to back. Your stitches will essentially disappear if you place your needle right back where the thread came out. When you're done, secure your thread by taking a couple of shallow stitches into the back of the work. There's no need to make a knot because we're going to be putting glue all across the back of this component, so a knot is really unnecessary. Some soutache artists will place a smooth sheet of plastic or even cardboard behind their work before they back it. I don't really find that to be particularly necessary, especially if I'm careful to not use too much glue. Starting with the washable fabric glue in the center in a dense spot where it's not going to push through the beads, I just dab glue lightly across the back of the work. It should really look like light mayonnaise on a sandwich. It should not be dripping, and you want to avoid poking the glue through the spaces in the beads. Don't push it through those spaces. Do try to make sure that you get it all the way to the edge. Those are the areas that you are most concerned about having be glued down. Lay your piece glue side down onto the wrong side of a piece of ultra suede. Put just enough pressure on it so that most of the glued area comes into contact with the ultra suede, but there's no need to press it really hard. Let the piece dry completely before trimming, about 20 to 30 minutes. Trim the ultra suede away from the work, being careful not to over-trim. Over-trimming is when you accidentally get your scissors slightly underneath the work. Rather, leave a very thin margin of ultra suede visible from the front of the work when you're finished completing the cutout. Using brick stitch edge beading, edge bead around this component just as you did in the arabesque earring lesson. Start by burying your knot. You can do this by sewing through any one of the larger beads and through the stack that wraps the upper shape. I like to start in the upper center for this, and I pick up 2 beads of one color, 2 size 11 seed beads, sew through the soutache stack about 2 bead widths away from where the thread last exited, and I exit out the back of the ultra suede. Sew through the last hole of the second bead, or the second hole of the second bead, so that the thread is exiting between the second bead and the first bead. Pick up another size 11 seed bead, sew into the soutache stack at the rib and out the ultra suede, and then sew through the last hole of the last bead so that the thread exits between the last bead and the second to last bead. Continue this pattern, keeping the beads in front of the jump rings. For each bead that sits in front of a jump ring, you will have to sew through the jump ring before sewing through the last hole of the last bead. For this component, I used the same 2 beads of one color, 2 beads of another color pattern that we used in the arabesque earrings for Anu.